Welcome to another episode of the Coaching Collective podcast, the community for coaches by coaches. Now here are your hosts, coaches Ed Hamilton and Paul Blackford.
Hey everyone, this is Paul Blackford and my co-host Ed Hamilton, and welcome to another episode of the Coaching Collective podcast. We're up to episode 6.5 because episode 6 we had an unfortunate mishap due to probably many reasons actually. I'm going to blame the new technology, and it was an absolutely amazing podcast where we interviewed Dan Williams, and having Dan on the show was important for a whole bunch of reasons. One being that he was our first kind of remote guest.
Yeah.
And we were using some new technology, and we missed the part where you press record, and it was a very simple, small mistake, which actually had a really big impact across our week. But just a moment ago, Eddie, you were talking about like us being a startup and small startup, and like those little things, like creating a podcast. It's actually not that little a thing. It's actually quite a big thing. And I guess the tolerance for something going wrong is lower than I definitely expected. I don't know. What do you feel?
Yeah, I guess the topic of today's podcast is, it brought up a bit of stuff for us both. And I think the topic of today was talking about like failure and how you feel, how you respond to, how you deal with it. And I think, yeah, for both of us, it's in this new venture that we're on. We said, like any new venture, any new startup, you're so passionate, you're so motivated, you just want to throw everything at it. And then as things settle into the process of, okay, now the motivation side is not dwindling, but it's got to be met with like systems and then starting to redirect on where we're putting our energy and trying to expand the reach of this thing. And we spoke about grasping every opportunity that we could, and things had slowed down, and this was like a good Kickstarter for us. And it was just such a good episode that we really wanted to share, because Dan's obviously got such a history in the experience and history in the industry, so many valuable points.
He was a fantastic coach to speak to.
Yeah.
And that's really something that you were quite adamant that we were going to talk to him about. Was he's a fantastic businessman and has a lot to offer in that space, and that's his primary gig in regards to what he does. But just as a coach, and we're actually going to come back and revisit Dan in that capacity in a later episode, one where we're going to press record this time.
Yeah.
But
having said that, we do have more guests coming on the show, so we'll talk about that more as we go, but learning from our failures in regards to, we're going to press the button and hit record next time as we go through.
Yeah.
But it takes one of those things to make silly mistakes and then look back, and it'll probably be the thing that makes us way better at what we're doing with this or trying to do with this. But yeah.
Through the week, it was interesting. I'm bringing this up now. We haven't spoken about this yet, but as I was thinking about the topic that we'd chosen for this week, and this is actually very much in the context of making a mistake, that sort of failure. However, being coaches and coaches in the strength and conditioning space, I actually managed to watch a lot of controversial videos on training to failure as a little side note to that sort of failure, and how important that is actually to gain, especially like hypertrophy and muscle gains. And I was trying to actually align some find some links between, okay, the act of training to failure is actually a positive thing in our training journey, for physiological reasons. However, take it into the mental game, the mental space. We actually start to move a little bit more now into failing in life, failing in our days or our endeavors. And one message that keeps coming through in a number of the people that I follow and the stuff that I read is that failure is a positive thing. It's the way that we learn really important lessons. And I'll probably dig into this a little bit more. Both of us, I believe, got to connect in a significant way with our wives to be very soon wives on what had happened, and have some really good sort of deep chats on impact on us personally in regards to that. And Don, I got to talk to her a lot about connecting with the feelings in and around that. And I remember actually as we were leaving here that day, and you said to me, you just feel sick. And that feeling, just connect with that for a moment. That sickness, that feeling that something is out of your control. It's gone wrong and it's out of your control. That's a horrible feeling. But you know what? How powerful is the connection with that feeling?
Yeah.
And being able to make positives from that, being able to learn that lesson, not repeat that lesson. That's super powerful.
Yeah, it definitely hit hard, this one. And then it took us, in regards to like being in this like startup phase of this business, we took a week off.
Yeah.
We did. We took a week off and we just like, all right, let's just reassess where we're at with what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve with this venture. And that's a whole nother side of hitting what feels like the end of the world with your failure. And then I know it doesn't seem like much, like, oh, you forgot to press record, but like we said, being in this space where we want to be able to make the most of every opportunity that we get, and taking the time out of our day, other people's day in particular, you felt that a lot. And then again, not being able to like share and keep reaching out to more people. Yeah, I was just like you said, that pit in the stomach. But we took that time and we took a week off and we just stood back a little bit, because I think even though we've only been doing it for a little while, it hit us at the point where we were like not really on top of our systems. We were a little bit more of I think just on the fly, a bit of a mess. Like we'd lost a little bit of that, as we're also trying to run a full-time businesses with Southwest and Odyssey. So we've got all of our clientele on top of that, and just didn't have that in place. So again, like we said at the start, there's always going to be something that comes out of that failure. However long that takes to come, you got to just allow yourself to have some time. I think we did the right thing in regards to, let's just chill out for a week, process it, because again, we'll probably dive into a little bit more of that. Particularly, I know for you, once we were chatting about it, like you were saying with Donnie, like having some really good chats as to like why that feeling hit so hard and what was behind that feeling. Because again, like talking to people now and even over on the podcast, you're like, oh, we made this little mistake. And it was like, why did that hit so hard?
It's so funny, because I sit here and saying it out loud, I'm like, dude, you didn't press record. Like, it's such a stupid little thing. There's a lot that I'd have to explain, I think, to get you guys to understand why it was a big thing. And for me, it's disappointment in regards to, I knew that I had disappointed my business partner. And I know that your opinion on that is, it wasn't on you, bro. And it's, yeah, great, cool, we're in this together. There was that. And I felt like I disappointed our guest as well, in regards to, he spent the time. Like that's really valuable. So number one, he spent the time, and he was very gracious with his response. It was really good. Anyway, like long story short, it actually was a big thing. It became a big thing because of what I felt, and chatting with Donnie about that, like those values of mine in regards to how important mainly those two things are to me personally. That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
It's actually because you value the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
That podcast you're creating, those chats you're having, some of the stuff that Dan spoke to us about, and I know there was some personal stuff in there for you that was huge. And it's not to say that it wasn't said. It was, right? So we come back to that and go, oh yeah, that's right, it was said, and that's all fine. We just didn't capture it and didn't get to share it with you guys. And the cool thing, like, there's the positive coming out of this is, we would never have thought of doing another podcast with Dan in the context of, hey, we got to talk about these great things at another time that no one actually got to share. And now we are. Like, we're actually started talking about that.
Yeah. It's been like, okay, run through, what did we cover? Let's try to touch in more depth.
Yeah.
How can we like dive into those while still touching on them? So again, let your failures, I guess from this first bit, let your failures like sink in. Go through that, a bit of an emotional ride, depending on what has happened, and then the time allowance of that. And I think trying to avoid that, trying to not allow yourself to feel those emotions is quite detrimental. Go through the process of doing it, and so that way you don't dwell on it for as long. We were able to go back and, like we said, have a bit of time, reassess, and now actually start making a plan going forward from there. which now we're back in, systems in place, sat down with one another and we're like, okay, how are we going to actually make this work? How are we going to mitigate these issues like going forward? How do we actually start to push into the plans that we want and we have for TCC? And it's been great since then, and teeing up and lining up, like I said at the start, a few more podcasts with some great guests coming up that are going to be very valuable for sharing their knowledge and their experience with all the other coaches out there. I think
I want to touch on that point for a moment, because I think there's layers to that. The positives coming out of failure, again, just sitting on that point, like in this situation for us, it actually allowed us the space to step back and have a look at TCC, what we're building in context of life and the other, our businesses and like what we're doing there. And then actually deciding that there needed to be a system that we need to follow in order for this to be consistent and stay a part of our day and stay a part of what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And in the process of us sitting down and coming up with something and then saying, all right, let's try this. Let's do this. And not only that, be okay with it failing.
Yeah.
Again, like actually going, this might not be the way and it might go belly up. That's okay. It's information. Let's use that.
I think, and this may relay into a little bit more as to how we make this relevant regarding like coaching, but like
we will.
We're
coming back to this point, I promise.
Stick with us. Hitting that point at such a point of what felt like a really big failure for us actually made us more accepting of failing. Like it's going to be a part of that process. Because again, I think when you're starting something new, and this kind of like lays into particularly starting on your journey of becoming a coach, is you want to get everything perfect. And you don't have the skill set for that to happen, and no one has the skill set for that to happen. And this is that conversation that we did have with Dan regarding Dunning-Kruger effect. Meaning like relaying this into being a coach, you step into the industry with a small amount of information, you think you know a lot because your information window is so small. So everything you know, you're like, oh, I'm a genius, like I know so much. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a client that maybe challenges those, or you're going to challenge them yourself, and then you're going to start to learn and you're going to start to grow your knowledge, and then you're going to be in this middle phase where you're really like, I'm learning all this stuff and now I feel like I don't know anything. And like the way through that is through failure. Try this, try that, try this, try that. Did this work? Did that not work? And I think as a coach, that's, yes, you're working with people, and we talk about failing. It's like, you can't really do too much wrong, right? Unless you go and like way out there, but don't be afraid of trying things. Don't be afraid of like what Paulie was saying before. We just laid out a really simplistic, manageable plan for our socials and our posting and communications with the group and stuff that we could consistently be doing. So each week has been building and being like, cool, we're like crossing the T's and we're hitting our targets. Great. There was a podcast episode from the RX Radio guys that kind of spoke about this, which was like, in particular, say like our social media. Your social media tells you a lot about you as a person, right? Whatever your media planning is, can you stick to it? Or do you go through these like phases of, and I've done it and I still do it, like on my Odyssey one, it'll be like bursts of information and motivation, and then you'll be like, off. And so like going through phases of that, it's like, all right, let's just try to with this, here's a fresh start. Let's just try to go and stick with something that we know we can hit. Because not only that, it's going to tell people more about us that we can stick to a plan. We can hit our 3 things a week, and we can communicate with our community X times a week, and then the chats that generally are happening in there anyway. And like, again, even over the last couple of weeks, it's just consistent. And that's going to be the thing that kind of builds back up the momentum, and also then gets like the motivation, but also the habits ticking over for you to go like, all right, cool. Now we're starting to go. Now we're starting to see, and just relaying that over and over again over time. It's like, all right, awesome. But don't stop because you're afraid of failing. Push, like you said at the start, push into that and learn from everything that, I'm say, go wrong. Because then again, at the end of the day, that's the quote, is it really failing? Yeah. No, it's just a learning experience.
Yeah.
And I was actually talking to Mags about that today on our online call, was like, one thing that's been sticking with me, and even more so relaying into my clients, and particularly when I've got some clients that are really struggling and ticking away with a lot of discomfort and pain, whatever it is may they be going, it's like sticking to a process, whatever that process may be. But if you are doing something that is pushing you in that direction, you are 100% more likely to get there than if you stop. And I think that was like the little bit of a crossing point for us. Okay, let's just do something.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, we treated it like training blocks. We were like, all right, this is our next 4-week training block. Does this work?
Yeah.
Does this work for us? And is it being consistent? And then at the end of 4 weeks, let's like reassess. But I think a big learning curve is there is like almost trying to fix everything on the fly. Like you got to give it time. You got to go and get some data, like collect and go, okay, this is actually like working and feasible and we're on the right track. And then also you can learn from that. And then again, in that time, things like the conversations that we've had, again, with our failure with Dan, but like how much stuff did we pick up from that that we can apply? Okay, dive into the vulnerability stuff. This is this is what I can see for you guys. There's definitely a space for what you're trying to build here with TCC. It's like all that stuff just like reinforces what we're trying to do. But yeah, like we said, relaying it into coaching, and particularly new to coaching, and we talked to a lot of new coaches coming through. There's that apprehension of, yes, you're not ready, and we get that, and we want to be that community there for you that can help you with that. But there's also, don't freak out about getting it wrong, because you're going to get it wrong.
One of the points that Dan made during the podcast actually was, I'm freaking out that we haven't pressed record. I'm just going to check, actually. Oh yeah, I love that. All right, this is not getting cut out. I'm putting this in. One of the points that Dan brought up during that podcast was that he's starting to delve into a couple of other industries outside of fitness and outside of the fitness space. And the topic he spoke about in and around that was like, if you're not doing something that scares you or challenges you to the point of, yeah, you're probably going to fail this, mate, what are you pushing hard enough? And so when we contacted him afterwards and told him what had happened, one of the first things he said back to us is, I'm really proud of you guys for doing something hard enough that you've failed.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, right. Okay, so, right, wrong. That's not what we're talking about here. Not whether we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Just the fact that we got ourselves into a situation where something that simple happened and it ended up being huge. Like, it's cool that we're actually pushing into something that's as uncomfortable or as hard to actually fail at and go, hey, hang on a minute, like reset. How does this need to look to be sustainable? I think about that with training as well. Like my own training clients, because one of the big spaces I'm in is longevity and that's sustainability. I find myself asking that question a lot. What does that need to look like for them in order to not fail, actually? And occasionally, if it does, just make sure that we use that data, use that information to feed back into what is enough. What is that sustainable solution that keeps them progressing, but not to the detriment of that longevity, that long-term goal.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a tangent.
But yeah, like
today's about tangents.
Coming back to
Ed, bring us back in again.
Coming back to what you spoke about at the start with the conversations that we had with our spouses in regards to diving into, I guess, like the feeling of that for yourself. Like, I know you touched on, it was like the values and stuff and that, but like working through that process for you, what were some of the things besides obviously talking to Donnie, but like and communicating with someone, but was there any like tools you relied on or?
So it was, I've already spoken about it in regards to the feeling, right? So checking in with that feeling. It was a horrible feeling, but constantly coming back to that and realizing that over time that was actually dissipating. So the feeling was not as strong. Started really strong. I think, like, for me personally, and this is where we got to, like, going right back, and this is childhood and whatnot, I actually wasn't able to fail a lot as a kid. I haven't had the experience in doing that a lot, like failing. And so one thing that's unfortunately taught me is failure is not an option.
Yeah.
Which is not great. That's a really not a great place to come at the world from.
Yeah.
Come at coaching from, doing anything from. Failure is not an option. Failure, if and when it happens, is devastating. It just because I just don't have the practice in actually having done it a lot.
Yeah.
So this was a really useful learning experience for me in that I practiced coming back to that horrible feeling of what that's like again, and realizing that it was going away, and it's not that the problem's gone away, it's just the things that you and I had been discussing. I'm taking a week off. We're gonna just give us a week. We're gonna catch up in a week, and we're gonna talk about what's next.
Yeah.
And then we did that. We sat down and we're like, okay, cool. You knew what you needed. I need to see this written out. I need to see this in a bigger space where I can see all the parts and all the moving parts and start piecing the puzzle together. I'm like, sick, great idea. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
What's the next step? Okay, cool. Bang, and all of a sudden this started to come together. And so like in for me, the tool was connecting with that feeling, because as things started to be put into place, I didn't have that imposter syndrome anymore. I started to realize that it was like, who am I to be this person on a podcast talking about coaching when I can't even record on a ringing thing?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
the first initial kind of like, you're useless.
Yeah.
And then progressing from there, it's like connect again, and we're actually making progress. We're actually doing positive things.
Yeah.
And we actually can do this.
Yeah.
And I'd actually like to think it's good.
Yeah.
Stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
We're really counting on those listen numbers to go up on Spotify. So if you guys don't know. It's all about the metrics. We need the data. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah.
Up. Have a listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, that constantly checking in and reconnecting with, okay, where's that at now?
Yeah.
You know, that was getting better. You're a big part of that process.
Yeah.
In regards to just feeling out where you were sitting with it as well. So maybe that's a good segue into
For me?
what.
Yeah, I think it's
your
just like
experience
one thing we always talk about with our clients is like load versus capacity.
Yeah.
And I think as we've spoken about, it's a passion project of ours, right? All of this is on our time and stuff that we are just genuinely very enthusiastic about, which is like the craft of coaching. Comes back to that a lot all the time. We just froth on what it is that we do. Yes, like we've reiterated it. Yes, we have our businesses. Yes, we have the things that provide for our families and provide all areas of our life for ourselves, and for other people. But at the end of the day, like we genuinely enjoy the thing that we do. And particularly for myself, a young family, a 2-year-old, a 4-month-old, running a business, trying to be a dad, it was like the straw on the camel's back that week where I had a lot going on. I was pretty crook. There was some absolute failures in onboarding with clients. It felt like a disaster week where, as I said in the staff meeting at the gym, it just felt like I wasn't doing anything very well in my life. And yeah, just got to that point on the Thursday where it was the high to the immediate low of the feeling of that empty stomach feeling and heavy legs. And just like that just really summed up my week. And I think that is probably why it was the response of need a week. Not even necessarily because, again, as we've spoken about, the point of not recording a podcast, but it was just I think the load, the stresses were very high that week. Just, again, managing a household with young kids is stressful enough because you can't take your eyes off them. They're literally dependent on you. So you come home and full day of training and you're with clients and it's in depth and you're like one-on-one all morning, and then you tell them to train, you get home and it's back on. And when you're not feeling 100%, that kind of like builds over the week and all these things. And then, yeah, I just knew that I needed to bring those stresses down. I needed to like take some time to just chill out from everything that was going on and then recoup, like you said, and then go from there. I think, I don't want to say, have I been more exposed to failing?
I don't know. I feel like some of the things we've spoken about in regards to you and your life, you've stepped up in a big way, in your personal life, and Like I see that again, time and time again in like your coaching and your family and with Carl's and the boys and I think you do a lot to ensure that failure doesn't happen.
Yeah, I don't know whether that's a fear of it or if it's just, I know for me a lot of it is regarding like a sense of responsibility to people. That kind of is one of my, it's a driving thing for me, but it's also one of those things that I can tip over the edge too much when I get like over the top with too much responsibility. And that's always just like managing, again, same thing, low risk capacity, client base, when things are going on at home, all that stuff. Yeah, I think this was just like an accumulation. So it hit a little bit harder on that. But I think coping mechanisms are like coming back to, it's you're pretty bummed because you want to share and you want to, the whole point of this is like share, connect, learn. And it was just like, there was all three of those things that we wanted to do with that piece. But it was like, at the end of the day, it's okay, recoup, get a plan in place. And then that was like the whole mantra that has been this year. And I don't know whether that's coming from some personal goals I've set for myself this year regarding training and some like aesthetic stuff for my training regarding like utilizing some of the study and the resources that I've just currently learned and gone through with some of the courses and like applying that to myself, but also having a long-term goal with that. Like it's my year goal. So like in that, I think I've practiced a little bit more this year than I have in previous years, like riding a bit of the roller coaster that is going with that. So it'll be progressions where like training is going really good. Say weight gain was on the way up, which was really good. Nutrition was like dialed in. And then I'll have a week where it's not very good. But not being deterred that it's going to be like, that's the end of it. I'm like, okay, if I'm doing one thing still that's going to tick me towards that goal, so whether that's my training that week, okay, just try to train this week. The nutrition is the nutrition. It's not the week that you're like pushing everything forward in that direction, but it was like, just do something that's going to make sure that the wheels keep turning over. And like just keep that sort of mentality of, if you stop, there is a 100% chance of that you are going to fail.
Yeah.
But if you just do something, then you can build off that momentum. And I think that was like, that's a really key point that has been super beneficial for me. And I don't know where that come from. I think one of the things the little concepts of that I've heard is like the man digging for the treasure.
Yeah.
And he's just digging and digging and digging and just doesn't find anything. And he's like, that's it, I'm quitting. And then the image is like the one shovel away from hitting the treasure.
Yeah.
And it's just, if you just keep your head down and just keep doing the work, it's like, you just have such more of a chance. I'm not saying you'll get there, and I'm not saying like anything is possible, but I'm just saying you'll have a much higher chance of getting there. Like eventually, if that's something that you're trying to get to, like you'll have a chance of doing it. You might not do it, but you're going to have a chance to achieve whatever it is. But you won't have a chance if you just give up and stop. And so this thing, I think it was a realization of what we're trying to do here. It's literally starting something from nothing.
Yeah.
Like absolutely nothing. And we're just like leading this cause that we see that there is, and talking to other trainers. It's, yeah, man, this is like great. Like I definitely feel like this is needed. And it's those days when it's like, this is harder than I thought it would be, right? And it's, okay, what can we do to just put one foot in front of the other and keep going forward with it? So, I mean, like this podcast today is just a good reminder to anyone out there. Like we're only, 6.5 episodes in. 7 episodes.
You get to see 6.
Yeah.
This is actually number 7. We're going to call it 6, but it's 6.5.
But I guess what we wanted to do today, because we've done, coaching stuff, and then we did, let's be more practical last week and talk about session packages and all this stuff. And then it was like, it's just like what's going on for us.
This is actually a real world podcast episode.
Yeah. It's
because this was in the space of the creation of TCC. This happened. And there's great lessons, like
100%.
super good lessons. Like the listening to you speak just then, and I'm thinking, what I want you guys to take away from this is, don't be afraid of failure. If that has prevented me from starting a lot of things. And as soon as I sit in front of that, I'm much more productive. I'm much more successful. Why? Because I just kept digging for that treasure. So take that away. Don't be afraid to fail. And yeah, it hurts in the moment, but use it as a tool and information to make the next thing that you do positive, beneficial, better. Yeah. That's it. That's the thing.
Is that what you're thinking about? Yeah. Not to keep harping on the same point, but I think that's it. This episode, just a check-in with us to anyone that's listening to this podcast, that we might just be whinging a little bit about how hard things are. But I just wanted to do a real one where it's like, hey guys, this is the thing that we're trying to do. You're going to fail at some point. Don't let that stop you from trying to do something. So yeah, just a little bit of what's going on with us and has been going on for us. And you see a lot of the glitz and glamour, and I guess even being this early into it, wanting to be very real with what we're trying to achieve. We know there's a lot of work that lies ahead, and it's going to take a long time to keep doing that. But I guess the message out from that is I'm excited to just take one step at a time and one thing. And then, like I said, the motivation is coming from, okay, who are our next 3 guests that we're going to have on? What does our next 3 months look like of just this podcasting part for it, and expanding the reach of getting more coaches on and communicating to more coaches? Because at the end of the day, this is all about networking, and we already have a network of coaches that we know. It's just a matter of communicating with people and touching base and trying to spread the word. And again, like I said, every single person that I've reached out to so far and talked about what it is that we're trying to do, so from Dan to Mel to Carter, Sam, like so many of the great trainers that I know are all like, man, this sounds great. Whatever you want me to do, I'd be happy to help, and I'd love to come on. We'll have a chat. And yeah, it's just like, all right, cop it on the chin, take a second. Don't stop what you're doing because you're doing the right thing, and then recheck in. How do I mitigate these things from popping up again? And then what have I learned from here? And then apply that into what comes next for you. And then just keep getting after whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, whatever it is that you're trying to do.
If you fail, it's all good. Keep moving forward. Keep chipping away.
I just had to bite my tongue so hard then.
Why is that?
Oh, sarcasm.
If you fail,
can't say it.
We'll leave you with that one. See you, team.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Coaching Collective podcast. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and YouTube. Join all the action on the Coaching Collective Discord community by visiting join.thecoachingcollective.eu. See you in there.